Just a quick note before you begin this short story. Sonbol is a multi-part series that is now on part 4, which you are currently listening to. I would suggest that you go back and listen to episodes 34.1, 35.2, and 38.2 before you listen to this episode. By all means, feel free to let the story stand on its own, but you have been warned. Sonbol, an original multi-part story by Jared I. McGee. Part 4, The Fallout. In the end, we had not had our access to the Beldam rescinded. For one, the scenario where we died has only been conquered once, and that was by the Commandant's quad. Additionally, it is meant to be a no-win scenario. It goes until the crew dies, no matter what. Our failure? My failure? Had been expected. Hell, it had been programmed so that we could know what such a situation might look like. As for the Commandant's talk with me, well, that was a different matter entirely. To say that she was livid isn't quite right. She was angry, to be sure. But it was an anger tempered by disappointment and a very real desire to help a colleague. In fact, that's what she had called me. Her colleague. That alone was a great compliment. I'd actually flinched when she'd said it. After some calming me and explaining that the Global Confederation was a military organization of sorts, she underscored that we as an organization had not swallowed all of their practices across the board. She herself hated the, albeit mostly necessary, strict pecking order. The GC had drafted all ages, all walks of life. We were desperate. This meant that it had to be a bit more relaxed with such things. Wives and husbands had joined together, brothers and sisters, grandparents and grandchildren, ex-husbands and ex-wives. All walks of life. The Commandant had called me in to warn me of the type of affection she'd seen me show Hy in a moment of weakness, in a moment of stress, in a moment of exultation. That is what she called our touch, though, our exchange, a moment of weakness. She said that she was only looking out for me, looking out for our quad. She pointed out that I might have caught the next round of attack in the Beldam had I not been caressing Hy's hand, which was, of course, true enough. The Commandant and I parted on good terms, maybe even familiar, relaxed, friendly terms, unless I was missing all my cues. Though strange at first, the more the Commandant explained the not quite so militaristic attitudes of the highest echelons of the GC, the more her attitudes toward me made sense. She was a colleague pushing me to be the best I could be, so Earth had the best chance at survival it possibly could. When I got back to Primrose 33, I entered to 3 concerned faces that had clearly been sitting for quite some time awaiting my return. Saucers bedecked with teacups stood testament to just how concerned they were. In the months following the Smock's contact and the GCs being formed, the Confederation had tried to demonstrate leadership by implementing a rationing system. Tea, biscuits, cream, sugar. In the GC, and its academies at least, these were rare commodities and not to be partaken in lightly. My quad was stressed. Rather than take a cup myself, I gave them a brief, thoroughly redacted version of my conversation with the Commandant. I let them know that we were all fine, and that the exercise was built to be unwinnable. I did not let them know that the Commandant warned me to beware falling for Hy and allowing that to become a distraction for me. The entire time I recounted the conversation, though, Hy's stare was unbroken. Barb and Anton both looked around, naturally breaking eye contact and hopping between normal cues that are the unspoken rules of any conversation that I'd ever been a part of. Hyacinth would not unlock. She knew the reason for the protracted conversation with the Commandant and was burning to know the uncensored truth. The repetition of the partial conversation only took about half an hour. Then, we split for our afternoon regimen, just like any other afternoon. This particular afternoon saw we of Primrose 33 off for the late afternoon and remainder of the evening, which was not a rarity, but something to be enjoyed. Anton always went to the horse races, a welcomed distraction from the doom and gloom of training day in and day out for the potential end to your species and planet. Barb spent most of her time in the combat arenas. Despite being one of the most skilled grapplers and hand-to-hand fighters anyone at Academy Prime had ever seen, she just refused to go a day without honing those already intimidatingly sharp skills. Good on her. That would serve the Quad and the Earth well when the time came. On any other afternoon, Hy would go study the newest theorems regarding the budding anti-grav weaponry field, or hypotheses involving the smock and where and what specifically they were. On any other afternoon, I would call home and talk to my mama, letting her know that I love and miss her. This afternoon was not the usual. Once Barb and Anton had said farewell and headed out, each within 10 minutes of the other, Hy all but cornered me in the living area of our Quad. She did not say anything. She did not have to. With that pregnant silence and that heavy emerald stare, I knew exactly what was expected. I spilled the rest of what the Commandant had told me. How she and I had killed the four of us because of our impetuousness and our immaturity. Our moment of weakness. How the relationship was not forbidden by the GC, but that it was a terrible idea on any account from every commander of every ship to have trained throughout the entirety of the GC. They all agreed this was bad. How, in spite of my feelings for her, I could not see us moving forward. In spite of my love for her, we couldn't make this happen. As a commander of our Quad, I could not and would not put us all at risk to exercise my always resurgent romantic side. She did not show any emotion. There was no response. I sidestepped her, grabbed the used teacups and saucers, and headed to the mess to clean up. I couldn't help but balk at myself a bit. Here I was, leading one of the premier crews in the Global Confederation, arguably one of the best hopes for the Earth against an alien threat, and I was washing the tea time china in order to escape a woman half my size because I like her. Even as a 16-year-old, I had more courage and sense than this. I quickly became lost in the task at hand, so it's no surprise that I lurched in surprise when I felt hands creep around me from behind, locking just below my navel. A teacup smashed against the floor. I cursed and slowly turned, not breaking the embrace. It was Hy, of course. She beamed up at me and pointed out to me that during my recounting of the Commandant's conversation with me, I'd mentioned not being able to be together despite my loving her. She giggled when she said this. Flowers did not giggle. She was right, though. I didn't remember saying that I loved her out loud. In all honesty, I can't recall what all she said to me in that moment, but she was right and she started spilling. I know that she admitted to hating me upon our first meeting. I know she told me she didn't know how that fire had turned into passion so quickly and unexpectedly, but that it almost immediately had. I know that she called me gra, one of the few Irish words I had learned in my time at Prime, the word for love or lover or something. I know that she reached up and touched my face so tenderly that the feeling brought tears to my eyes. I know that she leaned up toward me, softly kissing my neck and my jawline in an act that should have been awkward or strange, but it was not. It was authentic, real. In fact, it was the most authentic exchange I think I've ever had with another human being. At some point or another, she'd stopped speaking altogether and simply continued petting and kissing me. She pulled back eventually, releasing the embrace and taking my hands and lacing our fingers together. I defy anyone who tries to keep me from you, Robert. She was the only one to ever call me Robert, just as I was the only one to ever call her Hyacinth. We have found love in the most hopeless place imaginable, and if that's not what we are fighting for, I do not know why we are here. Then, we kissed. We cried. We held one another. Hell, somewhere in that morass of affection and emotion, we even finished the dishes and cleaned up the shattered teacup. It was 20:45 when Barb came back to the quad. 2200 when Anton came ambling in. By 22:30, we had announced to the other half of Primrose 33 the rest of the story regarding the Commandant and the full extent of the feelings we had for one another. We had to be honest with the people with whom we would be fighting and risking our lives. By 22:45, we'd answered some difficult questions from Barb and from Anton. By 23:10, Barb and Anton had announced that they had also been having amorous exchanges since roughly 40 days into training, that they thought our failure in the Beldam was their fault because they were doing something similar. By 23:30, we had popped open a bottle of whiskey that Anton had been squirreling away for a special occasion. And that is how we carried on for the next few weeks. In absolute defiance of tradition and general practice, we trained to fight all day, and we essentially double dated throughout the evenings. As Hyacinth had pointed out to me, this was being human. This is why we were pushing so hard to be prepared for the smock. The act of being in love, in and of itself, was the best thing we could all do to spit in the face of these alien bastards that dared threaten our home. Like the Commandant said, though, far too often, love does blind eyes to that which they might normally see. Thank you for listening to Part 4 of Sonbol, titled The Fallout. All sounds present come from freesound.org, and, indeed, they all come from the same contributor to the site, Soundathon. The tracks are being used under CC 0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. I truly hope that you've enjoyed this first episode back from hiatus that I am, tentatively, labeling as the first episode of Season 2 of Prose. We will be back together in 2 weeks' time to leap back into the world of stories. Until then, love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is stranger than fiction.